write a speech before?
Not me.
Most people, for the first speech they give, they end up losing the audience's attention early on because it's their first speech. But as you practice and you gain both experience and confidence, you get better.
Amen.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
An almost perfect example of this would be Barack Obama in his acceptance speech. Not only does he have an almost perfect ability to persuade people, but he has an army of speechwriters to back him up.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
It helps.
yeah, that definitely helps.
Hey.
The most adventurous and advantageous quality that I found in a speech would have to be the organization and flow of the bodies of his paragraph, the outstanding conclusion, and his use and placement of power of three. All right. Starting with the organization of his speech, Obama does a great job at explaining his views on the use of force. He then moved on to his first point, the prevention of war, and what would actually be considered war. He followed this up with a second point, the nature of peace that we seek, which tells us how to build a lasting peace. Finally, moving on to his third and final point, President Obama tries to explain how to establish a true or just peace, which includes not only the absence of violence, but a freedom from want. In the end, he talked about the complications of maintaining that peace. The overall sequence and structure of his speech was well planned out, as it starts with war and ends with a freedom from want. Going back to the beginning, he makes sure to connect each and every point he makes so that it all flows nice and well. He also makes sure to switch between war and peace a lot so that we don't lose attention, because that happens a lot. If you talk on one topic too much, then you start to doze off. Moving right into his conclusion. Is that right? Moving right into his conclusion. Yeah, moving right into his conclusion. Obama does a great job at twisting us around his finger and for an outstanding conclusion, because that's probably the best part of his speech. An amazing quote that sums up almost his entire speech would have to be this: the nonviolence practiced by men like Gandhi and King may not have been practical or possible in every circumstance, but the love that they preached, their fundamental faith in human progress, that must always be the North Star that guides us on our journey. In other words, we need to always work towards building that lasting peace. When times get bad, we need to have faith that there will be a better tomorrow. Another amazing quote summing up his speech is, let us reach for the world that ought to be, that spark of the divine that still stirs within each of our souls. While that alone would have been an amazing finish, he goes even further, telling us a few stories about the world we live in today. Okay, this is a good one. Somewhere today, in the here and now, in the world that it is, a soldier sees he's outgunned, but stands firm to keep the peace. Somewhere today, in this world, a young protester awaits the brutality of her government, but has the courage to march on. Somewhere today, a mother facing punishing poverty still takes the time to teach her child, scraping together the few coins she has to send that child to school, because she believes the cruel world still has a place for that child's dreams. He then closes by telling us there will always be war and oppression, but we still need to move further and strive further for peace. For this is the story of human progress. While I have to say the conclusion was, in my opinion, the best part of his speech, his use and structuring of the power of three served as the driving force. I'm going to start with the last use of the power of three, since it's the one that I felt was the most powerful. It is located near the end of Mr. Obama's third point in his body paragraphs. Obama states, "It perhaps comes as no surprise that people fear the loss of what they cherish in their particular identities, their race, their tribe, and perhaps most powerfully their religion. In some places, this fear has led to conflict at times. It even feels like we're moving backwards."
Something.
This quote is trying to tell us how strongly people feel in protecting these things, and how many times it has led to wars, countless wars. Even if we trace back every violent conflict, I can almost guarantee you that they will all come back to one of these three things. The next power of three I want to talk about is near the end of his first point. Mr. Obama states, "Those who seek peace cannot stand idly by as nations arm themselves for nuclear war. The same principles apply to those who violate international laws by brutalizing their own people. When there's genocide in Darfur, systematic rape in Congo, repression in Burma, there must be consequences. Yes, there will be engagement, yes, there will be diplomacy, but there must be consequences when those things fail." In this power of three, Mr. Obama tries to point out how ironic it is that some countries want to prevent nuclear war and seek peace when ironically they're already in war themselves. They say they want peace and more of a world peace, but they cannot even keep the peace in their own country. The next power of three I want to talk about is in Obama's second point, about halfway through, when he says, "So even as we respect the unique culture and traditions of different countries, America will always be a voice for those aspirations that are universal. They will bear witness to the quiet dignity of reformers like Aung San Suu Kyi, to the bravery of Zimbabweans who cast their ballots in the face of beatings, to the hundreds of thousands who have marched silently through the streets of Iran. This is telling that the leaders of these governments fear the aspirations of their own people more than the power of any other nation." In this quote, Mr. Obama is trying to tell us that governments with power-hungry leaders fear those that will take over from within more than they fear that of other nations. While each quote is different, they all share the same qualities. Each quote strengthens the speech almost tenfold. Without them, I do not think this speech would have been nearly the same effectiveness. Would have had nearly the same effectiveness. Now I'd like to move on to the power of three that did not have such a big impact, but still should be noted. The first being the one right at the beginning of the introduction. Mr. Obama states, "Compared to some of the giants of history who have received this prize, Schwarzenegger and King, Marshall and Mandela, my accomplishments are slight. And then there are the men and women around the world who have been jailed and beaten in the pursuit of justice, those who toil in humanitarian organizations to relieve the suffering, the unrecognized millions whose quiet acts of courage and compassion inspire even the most hardened cynics. I cannot argue with those who find these men and women, some known, some obscure,